Dr. Myers. Bethany had just stepped out of room 412 when the woman appeared in the corridor, polished, composed, the kind of put together that had taken real effort and was not going to be wasted on a hospital hallway. "I've spoken with the director," the woman said. Her voice was low and even, designed to sound like courtesy. "We'd like to transition Mr. Nam's care to a different physician. Someone with more experience handling cases of this particular sensitivity." Bethany looked at her, then at the clipboard in her own hand, then back. "I'm the attending physician on this case," she said. "Assigned by the hospital. If the director has something to tell me, he'll tell me himself." The woman stepped slightly closer. "I don't think you understand who you're speaking to." "I understand exactly who I'm speaking to," Bethany said. "Someone who isn't a doctor trying to make medical decisions in my corridor." "That's a no." She turned toward the nurse's station. "I will have you removed from this hospital entirely." Bethany stopped, turned around, looked at her with the warm, unhurried certainty of someone who has never once been afraid of a threat delivered in a hallway. "Then you'd better start making calls," she said. "I'll be here." She went back to work. "Stay with me. Because the woman who just tried to remove that doctor has no idea what that doctor already knows. Like the video, subscribe, and don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss this." Bethany Myers had been a doctor for 6 years and loved it without reservation. The private hospital where she worked handled powerful people quietly, private wards, discretion, and patients wealthy enough to make or end careers. Bethany had never cared about that pressure. She treated every patient the same way, honestly, completely, without fake deference. She knew every patient on her ward by name, not their chart name. Dr. Park once asked how she did it. A patient who had refused medication for 3 days had just agreed to take it after 20 minutes alone with Bethany. "I just listened," Bethany said. "You were in there for 20 minutes. "Right," she said. 20 minutes of listening. Her apartment was warm and lived in, books on the coffee table, a coat abandoned over a chair. Zara had a key, which meant Bethany came home on Thursday evening to find her best friend cross-legged on her couch. "You need a life outside that hospital," Zara said without looking up. Bethany sighed. "Not this again." "When's the last time you went anywhere that wasn't a hospital?" Bethany. "It's very clarifying," Bethany said, and went to change out of her scrubs. Nam Jinho had been running his family's empire since his father was no longer in the picture at 24. He had spent years being the only wall between Nam Holdings and everything that wanted to take it down. He was good at it. He was better at it than his father had been, which he understood was not something he was supposed to say out loud, and so he never did. He was disciplined and private, and had learned early that showing people exactly how much you knew was always a tactical error. He listened more than he spoke. For weeks, he blamed the exhaustion on work. By the time his body gave out in his office, he had ignored every warning sign. Bethany got the call at 11:42 a.m. Unexplained collapse, male, 32, incoming within the next few minutes. She was already moving before the call ended. She met him at the entrance. He was conscious, barely, but conscious, and she clocked his color, his breathing, the way his body was carrying itself, before she had said a single word to him. She had him stable and in a room within 40 minutes. She ordered a full panel, blood, urine, the works, and told the nurses what she wanted monitored and how often, and then she went and introduced herself to the woman in the waiting area who had been watching her with careful, measuring eyes since she arrived. Yoon Chan had beaten his family to the hospital by nearly 20 minutes. Bethany noted this. She noted the way Chan asked questions, not with the raw fear of someone who loved him and was frightened, but with the precise, directed quality of someone gathering information. She noted the way Chan watched the door to his room. She noted all of it and said none of it and went back to her patient. The blood work came back that evening. Bethany read the blood work twice. Then she went still. The markers were unmistakable. Someone had been poisoning him slowly for weeks. She sat with it for a long time. Then she went to his room. He was awake. He looked like a man who was not used to being horizontal in the middle of a workday and did not particularly like it. He watched her come in with the alert, evaluating the quality of someone who processed people quickly and accurately. "I need to ask you some questions," she said, "about what you've been eating and drinking regularly. Your meals, your drinks at work, anything you consume consistently. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, not alarm exactly. More like the face of a man who had a very good instinct and was feeling it activate. Why? Because I need a complete picture, she said. Which was true. It was not the whole truth. He answered her questions. She wrote everything down. She told him she would check on him in the morning and that he needed to rest. Doctor, he said, as she reached the door. She turned. What did the blood work show? Get some sleep, Mr. Nam. She went to the waiting room and told the family, Chaein, and his mother, Mrs. Nam, who had arrived 40 minutes after Chaein, that it was severe exhaustion and stress-induced collapse. Overwork. He needed rest and observation. Nothing to be alarmed about if he was careful going forward. Mrs. Nam exhaled with the full relief of a mother whose child was going to be all right. Chaein accepted the information with a composed, grateful nod. And for just a fraction of a second, so brief that anyone who was not paying the particular kind of attention that Bethany was paying would have missed it entirely, something behind Chaein's eyes looked less like relief and more like recalibration. Bethany filed it. She went home. She sat on her couch in the dark for a while before she went to bed. What Bethany did not know that night, and would not fully understand until later, was that Yoon Chaein had not come to that hospital simply because she cared. There had been a doctor assigned to Nam Jinho's case before Bethany ever got the call. His name was Kang Miho, and he had an arrangement with the Yoon family that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with ensuring that if Nam Jinho ever ended up in a hospital bed, what happened next went in a particular direction. He had been on standby for weeks. Chaein had called him the moment Jinho collapsed. But the hospital had already logged Bethany as the attending physician on call. And by the time Dr. Kang arrived at the facility and saw the level of attention on the case, the security personnel in the corridor, the number of eyes already on the room, the sheer quiet visibility of it all, he made a calculation. And then he made himself scarce. He was gone from the building before anyone had thought to look for him. Chaein's move in the corridor the next morning was not arrogance. It was a woman watching the only plan available to her slip away and reaching for the next available lever with both hands. She did not get what she needed. 2 days into his stay, Bethany came for evening rounds after the family had gone. She pulled the chair close to the bed. She sat down. She said, I'm going to tell you something now and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. He looked at her. All right, she told him. Not softened, not packaged straight. What the blood work showed. What it meant. Someone had been poisoning him slowly for weeks. He sat with it for a long time. Long enough that she didn't try to fill the silence. Then he said, How did you know not to tell them? I wasn't sure who was in that waiting room. Bethany said. He looked at her. And something changed in the way he was looking at her, not dramatically, just a small, specific shift. What do you need from me? He said. I need you to think carefully about everything you consume regularly. Your office, your home, anywhere you spend consistent time. I need to know who has access. She paused. And I need you to keep looking like a man who had a stress collapse and is recovering well. He was quiet again. Then you want whoever did this to think it didn't work. I want whoever did this to have no reason to panic or change anything while you figure out what you're dealing with. He nodded slowly. She stood and picked up her clipboard. Get some sleep. Dr. Myers, he said. She looked back. Thank you, he said. Not as a pleasantry. As a real thing. She nodded once and walked out. Discharge day arrived 4 days later. The family was there. Chaein was there, composed, immaculate, playing devoted with the practiced ease of someone who had been playing it for years. She watched Bethany with carefully managed eyes all morning. After the paperwork was done and the family had filed into the corridor and begun making arrangements, Jinho stopped at the door to his room. He turned back. Bethany was updating the discharge notes at the small desk by the window. Thank you, he said. For everything. That's my job, she said, without looking up. Can I take you for coffee? I don't do that with patients. Good thing I'm not one anymore. Something shifted in her composure. Just slightly. Just enough that she looked back down at the notes to buy herself a second. I'm mostly busy, she said. I'll work around your schedule. She looked at him for one more moment. Fine. 1 coffee. He nodded. Left. From the corridor, Zara, who had stopped by to return Bethany's apartment key and had therefore been standing approximately 4 feet from this entire exchange, leaned into the doorway. Bethany pointed at her without looking up. Not a word. I didn't say anything, Zara said. She was already smiling. She had been smiling since thank God I'm no longer one. One coffee became two. Two became a walk through the city on a Tuesday evening when Bethany got off shift earlier than expected, and he happened to be nearby, which she suspected was not entirely a coincidence, but chose not to examine too closely. The walk became dinner at a small restaurant he knew where nobody looked at anyone else's table. Neither of them named what was happening. Both of them were entirely aware of it. Chan knew within the week. She had people in his circle who kept her informed, not formally, just the ambient network of loyalty and obligation that surrounded a man like Jinho, full of people who understood that the woman he was engaged to was not someone whose interest in information should go unsatisfied. She knew about the coffee. She knew about the walk. She knew about the restaurant. She chose her moment carefully. A medical conference, professional, public, colleagues of Bethany's moving through the venue in clusters. Chan found her during a break between sessions, coffee in hand, and approached her in a way that looked, from a distance, entirely cordial. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Chan said, about what his attention means. Bethany looked at her. He's a polite man, Chan continued. He's grateful to you for your care. Gratitude can be easy to misunderstand. But I'm his fiancé. I think it would be better for everyone if you understood that clearly. Nearby conversations quieted. Bethany looked at Chan for a moment. Then she said, "You just said fiancé." Yes. The word landed somewhere in her chest, and she kept her face from showing it by the narrowest margin. Fiancé. She turned it over once. Twice. Thought about the walks, the dinners, the way he had looked at her outside the restaurant last week. I appreciate you telling me, she said. Her voice came out even. She was grateful for that. She picked up her conference lanyard and walked into the next session. Chan stood where she was. The colleagues around her were very busy looking elsewhere. Chan found him at his office the next day. She didn't call ahead. She never did. She sat across from his desk and said, "I heard you've been spending time with the doctor." She treated me, he said. Past tense and yet. She smiled. Practiced clean. I only mention it because people talk. I'd hate for something casual to reflect badly on her. She seems like she's worked hard for her position. He looked at her. What Bethany and I do with our time is something you and I have never had an agreement about, he said. We both know that. The smile didn't move. What moved was something behind it. She stood, smoothed her jacket, and left. The door closed softly behind her, the sound of a woman who had come looking for a denial and left with a confirmation instead. Bethany did not bring it up with Jinho for 3 days. Not because she was avoiding it, she turned it over and examined it honestly with herself, but because she wanted to be sure she was asking the question she actually wanted answered, and not the one her ego was reaching for. She asked him on a Wednesday evening on a walk, plain and direct the way she asked most things. Chan told me she's your fiancé. Is that true? He was quiet for a moment. They kept walking. There was an arrangement, he said, made between our fathers before either of them died. It was never something I chose. I have been looking for a way to end it properly for the last 2 years. He paused. I have never once treated it as real. I don't believe she has experienced it that way. But that is the arrangement that exists on paper, yes. Is it real? No, he said. Simply, without elaboration. It has never been that. She walked beside him for a moment. You should have told me. Yes, he said. I should have. I'm sorry. She nodded. The call from the hospital director came on a Friday morning. A formal complaint had been filed. A patient's family claiming misdiagnosis. Medical records submitted as evidence. She was being asked to respond to a review board within 14 days. Bethany pulled up the records they had sent. She read through them twice. The patient's name was familiar. She had treated him 8 months ago, a straightforward case, unremarkable outcome. But the notes in the record she was looking at were not hers. The records looked like her work from a distance. Up close, they weren't hers. Someone had built something that looked like her work from a distance. Close enough to file. Close enough to trigger a review. She called Zara. Someone fabricated medical records, she said. Zara was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Who has access to hospital record systems and enough money to pay someone to use them? Bethany didn't answer. She was already thinking about a woman standing in a medical conference with the particular composure of someone who had lost a battle and was planning a war. She called Jinho. Told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Send me everything they sent you, he said. All of it. She did. His people started working. 3 weeks later, he invited her to dinner. Small, private, a restaurant he trusted completely. She arrived slightly early, checked her coat, and slipped to the restroom before he arrived. On her way back, she passed a curtained alcove near the back of the restaurant, semi-private, the kind of booth designed for conversations that didn't need witnesses. She heard Chan's voice. She stopped. The doctor is still in the picture, which is the problem. A pause. Listening. I know that. I know. But the original method didn't move fast enough, and now there's too much attention on him for anything direct. Mother needs to decide on a different approach. Another pause. Yes. Soon. It needs to be soon. Bethany stood there for 3 seconds. Then she walked to the table, sat down, smiled when Jinho arrived, and was completely, entirely, professionally normal for the entire dinner. She laughed at something he said. She asked him a question about a neighborhood she had been curious about and listened to his answer. In the car afterwards, she turned to him and said, I need to tell you what I heard. She gave it to him word for word. Every sentence. He listened to the whole thing without speaking. Then he said, quietly, her mother. The way he said it, like something clicking into place that had been loose for a long time. I had suspected Chan of the records, he said. I assumed she was acting alone. But Chan doesn't plan at that level. She doesn't have the patience for it. He was quiet. Her mother has always been in the background of this arrangement. I never looked at her directly because I never had a reason to. He paused. I have a reason now. He looked at Bethany. We set a trap. Over the next week, they built a trap. Jinho quietly let it spread that he was reconsidering the engagement and wanted a private meeting with Madame Yoon. She agreed almost immediately. She suggested a venue. He agreed to it. What she did not know was that Dr. Kang's name had surfaced during his people's investigation into the falsified records, a connection 2 steps removed. A payment trail that his team had followed with the particular patience of people who were very good at following things. They knew Kang existed. They knew his name. They did not yet know everything, but they knew enough to know he was significant. For the trap, they found him. They found Dr. Kang quickly. Terrified and exhausted, he confessed everything. He signed what they put in front of him. Then they sent him back wearing a wire. Madame Yoon received him in a private room. She was composed. She was always composed, and she listened to his apology with the stillness of a woman who had been managing unreliable pieces for a long time. Then she spoke. She spoke about the plan with the careful precision of someone who believed they were among allies. She spoke about what they needed to happen now. She referenced the poisoning in terms that were unambiguous. She referenced Jinho's management, the word she used, manageable, as though it were simply a logistical consideration. She was thorough, because she was always thorough, and thoroughness in that room on that evening was the thing that destroyed her. Jinho had the full recording by nightfall. He called them to the Nam family home 2 days later. His mother was already there. He had told her only that there was something she needed to hear, and she had come. Bethany was not in the room. He had not asked her to be. This was his family and his world handling what it needed to handle, and she had understood that without his having to say it. He laid it out on the table. The toxicology report, the real one, the one Bethany had found and documented and kept. Dr. Kang. The falsified medical records. The recording. He went through it methodically, the way he went through everything. He laid out the evidence calmly. Chan went completely still partway through. She was still by the time he finished. The particular stillness of someone who has run out of counters. Madame Yoon's composure lasted 4 seconds longer. He had expected that. Mrs. Nam sat across the room and did not speak. She listened to every word. She looked at the woman she had welcomed into the orbit of her family out of respect for an agreement her husband had made, and she sat with the full weight of what that welcome had enabled. When he finished, she still did not speak. But something in her face broke, quietly, completely, with the kind of grief that doesn't require a sound. She was going to kill me, Jinho said. He said it to his mother. Not with anger. With the flat, careful honesty of someone stating a fact they needed said aloud. And you were going to hand her the keys. Mrs. Nam closed her eyes. Cheon and Madame Yoon did not leave quietly. Cheon left quietly. She was her mother's daughter, in that one way at least. Madame Yoon said several things on her way out that were noted and added to the file. They were handed to the authorities with the complete documentation, the poisoning, the falsified records, Dr. Kang's testimony, the recording. It was not a small consequence. Madame Yoon had built carefully and patiently for 5 years, and the structure was thorough, which meant the charges were thorough. Dr. Kang cooperated fully. His cooperation was the reason his consequences were the least severe of the three. He understood this and was grateful in the desperate, exhausted way of a man who had spent weeks waiting for a knock on the door. Mrs. Nam came to the hospital on a Thursday afternoon. Not to the ward. To Bethany's office. She sat down across from her, silver-streaked hair, formal posture, the bearing of a woman who had spent a lifetime composing herself for rooms, and she said, "You saved my son." Twice. Once in that room when you found what you found, and once by being the kind of person who understood what to do with it. She paused. I owe you an apology for what Cheon did to you in this building. The record complaint. The corridor. I should have seen what was behind her behavior. I didn't look. Bethany sat with this for a moment. You trusted the wrong people, she said. That's not the same as being wrong yourself. Mrs. Nam looked at her for a long, quiet moment. He's going to ask you something, she said. Say yes. Bethany looked at her. You don't know what he's going to ask. I know my son, Mrs. Nam said. Jinho found her outside the hospital that evening, in the particular quiet that settled over the city at that hour, the street noise reduced to a low background hum, the air cool. The weight of the last several weeks sitting between them like something that had finally been set down. It's over, he said. I know, she said. He stood next to her. Not in front of her, performing the moment. Next to her, the way he'd learned she preferred people, beside her, not at her. I've been trying to end the engagement for 2 years, he said. I wanted you to know that. It was never real for me. It was an obligation I was trying to honor until I could find an honorable way out of it. He paused. I had no idea what was underneath it. I should have looked harder. I know that. Bethany was quiet for a moment. You collapsed in my hospital, and I had to hide a poisoning diagnosis from your family for days, and your almost fiancé tried to end my career, and we had to run an undercover operation using a frightened doctor as bait. She looked at him. This is a very unusual way to meet someone. Is that a no? I didn't say that. He looked at her. Then he reached over and took her hand, not dramatically, just simply. The way you take the hand of someone you have decided is worth the reaching. She let him. Zara was invited to the dinner. This had been Mrs. Nam's suggestion, which surprised everyone, and which suggested that Mrs. Nam had been paying more attention to Bethany's life than any of them had realized. It was small, just the 4 of them, a table in a room that felt like someone actually lived in the house. It was inside, warm and real in the way that expensive spaces weren't always warm and real. The food was good. The conversation moved easily, which Bethany had not been certain it would. By dessert, Zara and Mrs. Nam were passionately arguing about television dramas like old friends. Jinho looked at Bethany across the table with the expression of a man who had not seen his mother animated about anything social in a very long time. Bethany looked at him and realized Zara might finally be wrong about her only having a job. After dinner. Outside. Just the 2 of them. The city going about its business around them. Your mother told me to say yes before you asked, Bethany said. He looked at her. She did what? She came to my office. She said she knows you. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then something moved across his face that wasn't quite exasperation and wasn't quite affection, the particular expression of a son who has been thoroughly and accurately known by his mother for 32 years. She's right, he said. He turned to look at her. All of it behind them now, the hospital room, the corridor, the coffee, the conference, the overheard phone call, the recording, the long, careful work of unraveling what had been built against him, all of it arrived at this pavement, at this evening, at this. I'm asking. Bethany looked at him. She thought about the blood work results she had read 3 times in a closed office. She thought about the 20-minute conversation with a frightened man who finally took his medication. She thought about what Zara had said, "You have a job, not a life," and she thought about how that had felt true then, and felt like it might be becoming less true now. "Yes," she said. Relief crossed his face. Then they walked back inside, because Zara and Mrs. Nam had moved on to a second drama and were not close to finished, and because the evening was warm and the food was still on the table and there was, for the first time in a long time, nowhere either of them needed to be except exactly here. If you stayed with this story to the very end, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, when did you realize Chaeyoung wasn't acting alone? See you in the next one.